Veronica presents the AI Repertory Theatre's production of New World Papers. Book 1, The Historian's Tale, by K.B. Shaw. Chapter 10, Revelation.
Now, for our first order of business.
Mrs. Grier led us from the office into the library proper. Bedford drew a long cardboard tube from one of the shelves. He removed some rolled papers and spread them out on the table. Joe said,
"Maps of the quarters."
She was obviously experienced in such matters. She retrieved 4 small polished stones from another shelf and placed them on the 4 corners of the map.
Gather round, lad and lasses. As you know, we are trapped down here.
He laid a finger on the map.
The only way out was here, through the granary entrance. We've suffered a partial collapse of the antechamber.
He pulled another map from the bottom of the pile and positioned it over the first. It was a map of the Grier estate, but because it was semi-transparent, we could see the outlines of the quarters and cellars beneath it.
You can see that the antechamber was not directly under the house. It was to the south of the cellars, with the quarters extending off to the south and east from there. For security reasons, the basin chambers are unmapped. They'd be here, east of the house and north of the quarters.
We are fairly certain that the cellars are in worse shape than the antechamber.
There was a tinge of anger mixed with the sadness in her voice.
Perhaps even a total collapse. But there is hope.
She mustered a smile.
We can dig our way out, can't we?
We could, but we're sure the council is watching, so it's best to bide our time. We have stockpiles down here that can last a group of our size 2, maybe 3 months. And we have this.
Mrs. Grier withdrew a card from a pocket and handed it to me.
Do you know what this is?
I recognized it instantly and passed it to Addie, who shared it with Joe. It's the symbol that marked the connecting tunnel to the upper basin chamber.
My daughter and Percy Williams. Have you met Percy, lad?
Yes, sir. Yesterday, when I conducted my interviews.
Well, he and Lenore had a thought. What if there were other such tunnels? So Percy organized crews to search the walls for other occurrences of this symbol.
Joe asked.
Did they find any?
Not this symbol.
Bedford tapped a spot on the map.
First, this is the location of the tunnel we opened between the basin warehouse and the quarters. Since we've only installed gas lights in the antechamber, the commons, and the few work areas we've reclaimed, most of the quarters remain in darkness. Consequently, we never paid much attention to these tunnels.
He tapped 2 other places.
Besides, they appeared to be dead ends. This tunnel leads east, almost to the rim by our calculations, and this one heads south about 50 meters.
The usually calm Mrs. interrupted him, her eagerness betraying her excitement.
They dead end in bedrock, and each has a unique symbol etched in the center.
I tapped a 4th spot on the map, another secluded dead end. And this?
Good eye, lad. That is the most secret of secrets known only to the missus and me.
And now you. There are too many people about during the day for a group our size to slip off into the darkness unnoticed. Fallon and Addie, you have unwittingly chosen an ideally secluded place to live, the perfect location for a clandestine rendezvous. Take an early lunch. Make a show of your youthful passion, and everyone will understand your absence this afternoon.
Joe looked at us and smiled.
Can you find Pod G, Joe?
Asked Bedford, pointing to its location.
Yes, sir.
In the dark. No lights.
Yes, sir.
Fine, that's settled. We'll all meet there a little after noon.
At lunch, we started playing our roles. Addie and I came out as an off-contract couple, while Joe was felled by one of her headaches, a real, if occasional, condition she suffered. After a quick meal interrupted by pecks on the cheek, hand-holding, and general mooning about, Addie and I made our wink and a nod excuses to sneak off. We were waiting at the mouth of the pod tunnel when Joe arrived a few minutes before noon, clothed all in black. She was a smart woman. Mrs. Grier and Bedford dissolved out of the blackness 10 minutes later. Bedford carried the tube with the maps.
Good, you're all here. Follow us. This way.
In a few days, we won't have to sneak off like this.
I'm sure that all 3 of us struggled to remember the path we took. I wasn't sure that even my memory would be sufficient to help me find my way in total darkness. We meandered down a maze of passages, each of us dragging one hand along the wall to keep us on course.
It'll take you a few trips to remember how to get here in the dark.
100 meters down one tunnel, we came to a dead end. I heard the sound of rocks being moved, then the scrape of metal on metal. A small door opened on the wall about chest high, exposing a series of lights laid out in a grid of 3 columns by 4 rows. The top row read 1, 2, 3, followed by 4, 5, 6, then 7, 8, 9. The last row was a pound sign, a 0, and an asterisk. They were like nothing I'd ever seen before, and bright enough to illuminate our faces.
In spite of the fact that it took James and me countless hours over a number of cycles to discover, you won't need Fallon's abilities to remember this.
She pressed the lights in a series. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, pound sign. In a manner similar to the granary entrance, the stone wall slid away from us. We entered a small, darkened area. We heard the wall slide shut, and then the room was filled with light as bright and as white as the light of Soul Mage. The walls were smooth and polished to a sheen. I looked around and couldn't find any gas lamps. Bedford pointed to the ceiling and we all looked up. The entire ceiling was emitting light.
This turns it on and off with a touch of a finger.
I've seen plates just like that all over the commons and in the pods. They don't do anything.
We know,
Said Bedford without elaboration. He motioned toward a metal hatch on the left wall.
You've seen one of these before, lad. Go ahead, open it.
Stepped forward and readied myself to put my back into turning the locking wheel. I was amazed at how easily it turned. I could have done it with one hand.
This hatch is as old as the IE New World.
I understood the implication, but Addie and Joe were puzzled by the reference.
As historian, and more importantly as the descender, you will have the privilege of explaining to your team.
There was a hiss as the hatch opened.
The temperature, air pressure, and humidity in this area has been precisely controlled ever since the room was created.
The room lit up upon our entrance. There was a polished glass table in the center of an expansive area. Under the table were 10 metal stools. Lighted glass cases lined 3 walls from floor to ceiling. We browsed along the walls, wondering at the artifacts, books, and unknown items the cases contained.
What are these?
Addie was shuffling through papers she found on the table.
They're Fallon's drawings, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
Joe moved beside her to see for herself.
Oh my, how horrible, all those rows of gaping teeth.
Are these real? Did you see all this in the basin?
I went to the table and sorted the drawings into 2 groups. These were in the basin. I gave Mrs. Grier a questioning look. She nodded her assent. And these were in the below. They both gasped at the words.
That was the lad's mission, don't you see? To show us what's in the below.
And what did you find?
I separated the images of the IE New World from the other drawings. This,
You better pull up a stool.
said Mrs. Grier as she sat down at the table.
The boy has quite a story to tell.
Bedford broke the silence that had filled the room when I finished recounting my descent into the below.
Now that's history, lad. Full of life. Personal.
But how do I put it to paper? What form does a history take?
As Bedford said earlier, these people, the builders, were excellent planners. They anticipated the very situation that exists today. Each item here seems to have been selected for a reason. It has a purpose. You will find that the items are subtly grouped
She said, pointing to the top shelf on the left-hand wall.
and arranged progressively starting from there. They made it easy for us. The cases are numbered. The first set contains books, very old books that they, in their wisdom, thought to bring with them on their long journey through the stars and to preserve for us. You will find examples of histories, texts, fictions, diaries, and journals.
Personally, I find the histories stiff, lifeless. Pay attention to the journals and diaries. You've never read anything like them. They're like living the person's life. Start by reading those, the journals and diaries. They'll help you find your voice as historian and start the three of you thinking about the challenges we're now facing.
You will learn of countries and cultures, of language and art, and of religion and war. I've studied the items of this room for many cycles. Now is the time to document the story they tell. It's up to you to tell that story to the people of New World.
Bedford moved to the other end of the table and laid out the maps.
This room is unique. At least we thought so until yesterday. It is powered by an energy the planners called electricity. We installed gas lights in the small section of the quarters that is currently lit. We assume that the entire quarters used to be lit in the same manner as this room. We also found what might be controls on the walls all over the commons, shop areas, and dormitory pods. But we never found the source of the electricity or figured out how to turn it on.
Mrs. Grier pointed to the southern tunnel.
The symbol on this wall looks like a bolt of lightning.
We all exchanged excited looks.
And the symbol on this wall is two birds.
Could it be a way out?
We think so.
Said Bedford, a gleam in his eye. A thought came to me. Are there numbered light grids like here?
No, lad. We'll need to break out the sledgehammers.
Now to decide, which way do we go first?
We have enough workers. Can't we go both ways at the same time?
This is history, granddaughter. The historian cannot be in two places at once.
Out then,
Said Joe.
Yes, out.
Agreed Aiden. They turned to me. I did not reply immediately. It's high conjunction, I said finally. Where would we go? New World is snowbound for another month and a half, at least, and the council could be watching wherever it leads. Plus, it may only lead back down to the basin, and we already have a way to get there. I paused to think.
Go on, Fallon.
We have supplies, and you said we should bide our time. I faced Addie and Joe. I say we go south. They nodded.
We agree. Joe, you head back to the commons and round up Lenore, Percy, and the twins. If the last of the observation team has returned, grab Randall too. Fallon and Aiden, you return to your pod, and then make your way back from there.
He pulled a watch from his pocket.
The missus and I will meet you in the library at 3 o'clock.
When Lenore found that I was part of the meeting, she greeted me as if nothing had happened, and I her. Bedford laid out the maps and explained the situation for the benefit of the twins and a tired and overwhelmed Brian Randall, the group's chief engineer. He swore them to secrecy, then told them of the archive room and explained what he and the missus had learned about electricity. Bedford laid out a plan to meet at the south tunnel at midnight.
Bring hand lamps. Toby, you and Sean grab 2 sledgehammers. Randall, bring whatever tools you think might be needed.
He scratched his head and continued.
The tunnel is a good distance away, but it's straight into the wall. No twists or turns. The pods are on the other side of the commons, and it'll be after lights out, yet someone might hear the pounding.
If they do, they do. We're going to end this secrecy soon anyway. If our hand is forced early, so be it.
Sean and Toby stood with hammers in hand as the rest of us directed our lights at the lightning bolt symbol on the wall. The tunnel practically echoed with the sound of our collective heartbeats. On Mrs. Grier's nod, they raised their tools. Toby took the first swing. The hammer met so little resistance, it slipped from his hand and disappeared through the hole it had made. We heard it clatter to the floor beyond the wall.
What the bee?
Cursed Toby, looking back at us. Sean secured his grip and swung, inflicting a gaping wound from chest height down to the floor. He leaned forward.
Someone, hand me a light.
I was closest, so I handed him mine. He directed it at the edge of the wound. Toby crouched, scooped up some rubble, and sifted it through his fingers. He rose and held his hand out for us to see.
Mortar, or something like it, made to look like bedrock. It's not more than 30 centimeters thick,
Said Sean. He peered through the gouge.
I can see a set of small lights on a wall about 3 meters in.
Mrs. Grier took Bedford's hand and squeezed it. Addie gasped. Joe embraced Toby, then playfully boxed him on the ears.
Stand back,
Said Toby. He turned and gave the wall a swift kick, and then another. He quickly opened a hole big enough to walk through. Sean scraped the sharp edges off the opening with the hammer handle, then stepped back and with a sweeping gesture said, "I believe the honor is yours, Mrs. Grier." The missus stepped forward and ran her fingers over the grid of lights, almost caressing them. When we had all gathered in the chamber, she said,
Could it be, James? Could it be the same?
I would be willing to wager that it is. The planners would test you with one, but reward you after that. They did the same thing with the symbols on the wall. They gave us the first symbol, but not the others. The first wall was difficult to breach, now this.
Mrs. Grier's finger hesitated, hovering above the light numbered 1. She pressed in the sequence. A section of the wall slowly slid open. She stepped through and touched the inside wall. The room lit up, revealing another hatch. Our excitement was palpable as Bedford turned the locking wheel. There was no hiss this time. No lights came on as we entered. We all shone our lights over the walls, revealing a long room about 4 meters wide, with another hatch at the far end. Our hatch was close to the right-hand wall, which held a static box. Percy cranked it to full power, and we turned our lamps off. Our small band drifted toward the far hatch, examining the room as we went. The left wall reminded me of the room that led out into the basin. It had tool bays, shelves of gear, and benches to sit on. Nearer the far hatch, heavy coats with hoods hung on the wall. They had the look of our winter coats, but the feel of our rain gear.
May I?
Asked Lenore as we reached the second hatch.
Of course, my dear.
Lenore struggled a bit to turn the wheel. It was not as pristine as the others. There was a bit of a pop when it unsealed, and it kicked inward, almost knocking her off her feet. I caught her. We were immediately assaulted by a blast of cold, damp air. Toby put his shoulder to the door and Sean cranked the wheel as soon as it was closed.
"Seems this gear is here for a reason,"
said Randall as he began sorting through the shelves. We all followed his lead. It was going on 2 in the morning when we finally reopened the outer hatch. The passageway ahead of us was dark, but it was equipped with static lights strung in runs like those down in the basin. A low sound echoed down the tunnel. We walked for more than 2 hours, the sound getting louder with each step. The noise was deafening when we reached a stairway leading down. We descended single file, Bedford in the lead, me second, and the twins in the rear. It felt familiar, almost reassuring. The steps brought us to a long, railed gallery that overlooked a vast, dark cavern. The roaring sound was unmistakable to everyone but me.
Rim Falls?
Said Addie, her voice filled with awe. Jo switched on her hand lamp and leaned over the railing to look down. Suddenly, the railing tore loose from the wall and gave way. Jo began falling into the void. Toby's hand shot out, reaching for her. It slid down her body as she fell forward, down her back, down her leg, as he tried desperately to gain purchase. His fingers contacted the top of one of her boots. Just as she was about to slip away, his fingers clutched her ankle. Her weight pulled him to the gallery floor as her body slammed against the wall. Sean and Lenore reacted quickly, but it was too late. Jo's foot slipped from the boot, and she was gone.
"Joe!"
Bellowed Toby. He began to sob. The rest of us stood in stunned silence. It had happened so quickly.
Stand back from the railing. We don't want to lose anyone else.
Toby,
Said Lenore, rubbing his back.
you did what you could.
"Come now, brother."
Toby!
"Joe?"
Toby, it's only about 2 meters down. I'm a bit bruised, but otherwise I'm fine.
She moved away from the gallery wall and waved her light in our direction.
There must be a way down.
As we carefully made our way along the gallery in search of a way down, banks of illuminated panels came to life overhead, exposing the most fantastic machines I had ever seen. 8 giant metal wheels resembling the water wheels that power New World's mills and factories were lined up at the mouth of the cavern. They rose 50 meters above our heads and gleamed in the light. One extended into the crashing water of the Rim Falls and turned as smoothly as it must have when the planners first built it. The other 7 were retracted, pulled back from the powerful waters. All were connected to mammoth engines of some sort. The one paired with the moving wheel thrummed. We located a stairway and soon found ourselves on the main floor. Toby took Jo in his arms and kissed the scrapes on her face. Jo's fall may have triggered the lights somehow, but there were bigger things to think upon. We wandered among the machines, gawking, enthralled, and indifferent to the cold. The engines were 3 stories tall and girdled with walkways. I accompany Mrs. Grier, Bedford, and Randall on a survey of the engine that was working. The other team members looked for anything that might tell us how this all worked. Randall laid a hand on the engine and felt the power of the machine. He trembled with the excitement of this discovery and the possibilities it presented. The twins were waving for us to come down and follow them. They pointed to a large window in the back wall, high above the cavern floor. They guided us to a door in the back wall. It was made of flat metal, with no handles or locks. Toby grinned as he pushed a round button beside the door, causing it to split in two and slide open, revealing a small room.
Come on,
Said Sean. We all stepped in. There were 3 more buttons next to the door inside the little room. Sean pushed the top button and the door slid shut. A moment later, our knees almost buckled under us.
What the B?
Cursed Bedford as he kept Mrs. Grier from falling. Randall beamed.
It's moving. It's moving upward, quite rapidly.
This is an elevator, James.
Said Mrs. Grier, a hand to her mouth. She looked lively and youthful.
Just like in the books.
We glided to a stop, and the door opened into a long, narrow room. It was lit only by the cavern lights, which shone through a 4-meter-long window that looked out over the machines. The women stood at the window in awe. The cavern lights made the falls look like a shimmering silver curtain. Centered on the window was a waist-high, sloping console with 8 large rectangular glass plates embedded in its surface. 4 plates were positioned to each side of a now familiar number pad. Directly below the number pad was a small plate similar to the light switches. Randall touched it. No lights turned on or off. He then tapped the sequence into the number pad. The 8 large panels in the small plate flickered to life. We all gathered behind Randall as he examined what appeared to be colorful control diagrams for each of the 8 machines. The small plate displayed a picture of 4 white buttons, each at the top of a vertical line. The words overhead lights were at the top of the display.
let's see what these do.
Said Randall. He tapped one of the buttons, then the next, and the next, and the next. He tapped them in different orders. No response. Addie stepped forward, set the fingers of her right hand over the 4 buttons, and dragged the buttons slowly down the screen. The cavern lights dimmed, and the curtain of water became transparent. We were looking east over an endless expanse of snow-covered treetops. The sky had begun to glow red as Sol Min rose, with part of Sol Mage exposed along the trailing edge. In the distance, the fount was ablaze with soul light. I stood next to Addie and took her hand in mine. It was the dawn of a new day. It was the beginning of a new world.
End of chapter 10. Next up, decisions.